Hey, what's up, White Knuckle Army? Welcome to episode number 12 of the White Knuckle Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast, episode number 12. Today we have with us Todd Pringnitz, of course, my esteemed co-host, and also joining us on the other line will be Jeff Fredericks from Fredericks Champion Choice Turkey Calls. Jeff's a longtime friend of mine. Jeff and I went to high school together way back in, a long time ago, and we've never lost touch, and Jeff has always had a passion for turkeys ever since they introduced him into Wisconsin sometime in the 80s. Since then, Jeff has turned what was a hobby into a full-time career. Jeff gave up his career as a graphic arts designer for a local graphic arts place up there where he lives, and now just makes turkey calls. Previously to that, while he was a graphics arts designer, however, he did tour the country on the professional turkey calling circuit, I guess you would say. I know that he placed in nationals 4 different times. I think he was a 12-time Wisconsin state champion turkey caller, along with Iowa and Minnesota and a few other states thrown in there. So continuing with our 2-week theme of turkey hunting here before the upcoming turkey season start in the next couple of weeks, we hope you enjoy our conversation with Mr. Jeff Fredericks. Well, welcome to the White Knuckle Web Show. Today we have with us Jeff Fredericks of Jeff Fredericks Champions Choice Turkey Calls. Jeff, how are you today?
Very good.
Todd, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, man. I have been actually watching a couple really nice toms out on my property. Every single day they've been doing the rounds, so I've been kind of like, getting a little more excited every day, man.
And Todd, 3 years ago you didn't turkey hunt, right? 4 years ago, 5 years ago? What has it been?
Oh, let me think here now. I think I just started about 5 years ago when I bought this property, 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
So,
and Jeff, how long have you been? You've been turkey hunting ever since I can remember. I mean, I don't know that you were 12. I don't know that we had turkey hunting in Wisconsin when you were 12, but you were turkey hunting when turkey hunting wasn't cool.
That's right. I was in high school. My dad and I sent in for our first tags in 1986, and we didn't get tags that year. But I was already, of course, at the outdoor shows, hanging around the booths where the guys were blowing on them cool little things they stuck in their mouth. So I was starting to get pretty primed up about it already. And then in 1987 is when we got our first turkey tags in Wisconsin, and I've been hooked ever since. That's for sure.
And
wow, man!
You were a graphic arts designer, correct?
Yep.
And
I was an art director at a sign company here, a local sign company.
And now you gave all that up and you make turkey calls.
Yep. Yep, I guess you could say that.
Jeff, how long have you been in the turkey call business?
Well, in 1988 I entered my first turkey calling contest and I won it. And as a junior, of course, I was, in high school. And, I don't remember the year, but at some point, one of my good friends convinced me to build them a turkey call. And for 15 years, it was just kind of a thing where he would tell his friend, and then his friend would call me on the phone, on my home phone, and say, could you build me a couple turkey calls? And I'm like, well, yeah, all right. And then, it kept spreading, and then once I left my full-time employment as the art director, I thought, well, here's a perfect chance to, actually go right out there and sell my turkey calls. So there was at least 10 to 15 years where I had kind of a grassroots group of guys who were using my calls and giving me feedback. And the feedback I got was, I can't use any other mouth calls, so you better just keep making these for me.
So do you focus, Jeff, do you concentrate mostly on mouth call type products, or do you have a variety of different calls?
No, I'm a mouth call. I'm
Okay.
just a mouth call fanatic, and then I also make a very custom turkey decoy.
Oh, right on, man. Well, we'll have to check that out too. My mouth call experience has been almost choking on one on a ground blind once, and from that moment on, I decided a slate call is probably a little safer.
Well, I get that a lot from people, and a lot of people have trouble learning how. They buy that turkey call, and in their mind they want to make turkey sounds like right away. And a lot of people do have kind of a gag response when they put that call in their mouth. And I've never heard this information from other companies, but what I say is the first day you have that call, forget about making turkey sounds, sit down, watch your favorite 1-hour TV show or whatever, and just have it sitting on the edge of your mouth. Just have it, don't even put it fully in your mouth. And then the next day, do that again and get it a little farther in. Work on it over a week's process so you get over the gag response, because if you try starting to learn how to call on it and the call isn't placed in your mouth properly, you're lengthening your learning curve.
Sure. I can see that. Yeah. Jason, have you ever used a mouth call?
I have. Jeff taught me. Boy, it had to have been in the late '80s or whenever he started calling. We'd be riding around, and that's just how I learned. Is exactly how he said. Just learning to put it in my mouth first, and get used to that, and then eventually getting it up comfortably in the roof of your mouth. And once it was up there, then learning how to make noise, and then learning how to manipulate that noise to sound like a turkey, I guess would be the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, back then, Jason, we were just happy to have a fun little noisemaker,
Exactly. We
No, I want to, while we're on the topic of calls, part of why I am such a terrible turkey caller and turkey hunter is I've never really hunted with any good turkey hunters. I don't really watch outdoor television anymore for like calling techniques or any of that stuff. Pretty much just been kind of learning on the fly as I've been going. But what makes a mouth call more effective, or what do you like about a mouth call compared to the other calls? Because the one thing I've learned just from going to all the different trade shows is that there are literally a million different types of calls by a million different manufacturers. Everybody's got something else, and I've like where I'm at, just not being a very confident turkey hunter, it's very overwhelming to even like go to one of these tables and be like, where do you even start? So I guess I would like to know why you use mouth calls so specifically, and then maybe for the the beginner hunters like myself or the more novice hunters, what kind of calls do you recommend? And like calling technique is another thing I know nothing about other than just making it go.
Well, those are three really good questions, and by all means, I could go on for a long time. To start with, I'll talk about why I like a mouth call more, and maybe this is a little different opinion than what you've heard, but as humans, we speak out of our mouths, right? It's intuitive to our brains to speak out of our mouth. And I believe that once you become proficient with a mouth call, you're more spontaneous with that call because it's more natural to use your mouth to communicate, right?
Sure.
When you're using friction calls, there is a mental delay. Okay, turkey gobbled. Oh, one gobbled. You set your gun down, you pick up the pot and the peg, and then you call. And what happens, there's a 5 to 10 second delay there, whereas many times when I'm calling with my mouth call, especially if I'm trying to communicate with hens, that immediate and abrupt response is I think a nice advantage with the mouth call. Plus, to me, it's more intuitive by using that call that's inside my mouth.
Yeah, I can understand that just from the whitetail side, because I'm a big fan of mouth calling, just because I think you can create just, if we have an esophagus, a whitetail has an esophagus. I'm not sure exactly if a turkey, if that's what you call it, turkeys. Giblet area there, an esophagus.
They've got a voice box.
There we go. But no, there's something to that. I can understand that. Now, the one guy I do hunt with a little bit, he uses a mouth call, and it's freaking loud, like really loud compared to what I use. Is that an advantage?
Well, I do think that having volume is an advantage because you're casting your net in a wider, area.
Sure.
It's increasing your odds just a little bit. And by no means do I call super loud all the time, but let me tell you about real turkeys. I mean, real turkeys they can call as loud, if not louder, than pretty much anyone with mouth calls or friction calls.
Okay.
With the exception of a few of the high-end handmade box calls. Don't worry, turkeys are loud. They're used to communicating at levels of volume that we probably can't hardly replicate.
So there's no such thing as maybe calling too loud. You don't have to necessarily worry about freaking anything out.
I don't worry about it. Again, it comes down to as long as you're confident and proficient with the call you're using, I say that is a aspect that people might worry a little too much about, and they're taking their focus off of the fact that, well, I want to make sure I'm sounding as much like a real hen turkey as I can. Mm-hmm. I think that's where the focus needs to be.
One thing I've noticed just over the years when I've been bow hunting and just listening to turkeys socialize is that kind of like deer, there's really no two calls that sound the same, and sometimes you're listening and thinking to yourself, is that a turkey? It doesn't even sound like what you hear. I mean, they just make some goofy noises sometimes.
Vocabulary, and we as humans, we really don't know exactly what all of that is, and we never will because we're not turkeys. It was funny. This brings up a fun little thing that I've been kind of telling people in my seminars. My uncle, I started hunting with my uncle, 25 years ago. And we've, over the years, we get in hunting camp together and stuff, and we've hunted many years. And this year he came to one of my, where I had a booth at a show, and I'm like, hey, you need some calls? Yeah, I'll get you some calls. And he kind of said, he's like, well, I don't get into calling as much as you because I don't know what I'm saying to the turkeys. And, I just chuckled a little bit about that. And after he left, I'm thinking to myself, well, that is a common thing that I hear from people. Well, I don't call much because I don't know what I'm saying to the turkeys. Well, let me tell you something about myself. I have no idea what I'm saying to the turkeys either because I don't know. We're humans. They're turkeys. We don't know. In the 30, this will be my 30th year turkey hunting. And all those years of turkey hunting, basically over the years, you just kind of keep bumping into one side of the road and the other. And then, this is what's worked in the past, and then you just keep doing it. I don't know exactly what I'm saying to the turkeys, but I know that when I call aggressively and I replicate that cutting and yelping of a hen turkey, I get a lot more success,
Sure. Well, it's Jason, do you have any comments here on this particular? You're way more into turkey hunting than I am, so you might be able to add something that I don't know.
No, I would just say that I guess one question that I have for Jeff, and we, shared the turkey woods together a few times. It seems like more and more, at least in Wisconsin, especially the early seasons, it's not impossible, but it's nearly impossible to call in a tom anymore, and that's just been my experience. And is it because I suck at calling and keeping in mind you taught me, Jeff. Is it because of the time of year? Is it because I'm not doing the right calls? Or is it just because they're so henned up, you're just not going to call them away, and you've got to wait till they're not henned up, maybe later in the morning or whatever the case may be? What is it that you do when you can't get them to respond and you just can't call them in? Because correct me if I'm wrong, there's times that you just can't call them in.
Exactly. There's two aspects I want to talk about with that question. The big one is persistence. Persistence is what kills turkeys. If I have a gobbler that I was gobbling a little bit in the morning, and it happens more often than not that he doesn't come in. Did you try him at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? Did you try him at 3? Are you trying at different times of the day? That persistence is what kills a lot of turkeys. Now, with that being said, you touched on a absolute truth about the structure of the turkey flock in much of Wisconsin. We have in Wisconsin a very liberal turkey season at this point. And we have, in the last 10 years, switched from a quite restrictive turkey season in the spring to a very liberal turkey season. And what has happened is, over the years, we have changed our flock dynamics just enough to where the surplus of gobblers we used to have that made it seem like they were dumb and they came into the calling easier, what that comes down to is a flock dynamic that's changed just a little bit. The turkeys that used to come in are already in someone's freezer, and it's not just a 1 year process. It's if someone got in a nice hunt last year, 240s away from you, and they shot 3 gobblers off of their 40 instead of 1, that affects, how hard the gobblers in your area have to work to have hens around them. And that is what I'm seeing. That's where the persistence comes into play, where you may have to wait longer in the day for a gobbler to not have hens with him. You might have to hunt them more in the afternoon. The persistence becomes more of a hunting style factor when your flock dynamics change just a little bit.
And I think that speaks to what Cuz Strickland said to us last week, Todd, and that's when he was encouraging you to put down your bow and grab your gun. When you hunt with a bow like we do, Jeff, obviously, you're restricted to a ground blind, and, pulling down that ground blind and moving it and et cetera becomes, a harder task to accomplish than
a pain in the neck.
Right. Then
but that's what you got to do here. What I say, and my dad is very guilty of this, where he'll go out like in a week or two, and he'll stake his ground blind down, and then he's less likely to move that blind. Just like good whitetail hunters spend more time scouting and less time hunting, and keep an open mind about it, and use trail cameras. If birds are frequenting a field at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's hard for me as a turkey hunter to think of it this way, because obviously the early morning is the exciting time to turkey hunt. Skip the morning, hunt that afternoon. Look at it as blocks of time. Okay, I'm going to hunt 2 hours. I'm going to go out at 5 this afternoon. I'm going to hunt till 7. And again, don't get too tied to that permanent blind location. I use when I'm hunting out of a blind, I use a Magnus rack pack where, and I don't think they unfortunately make them anymore, but my double bull blind is wrapped up on the backpack that turns into a seat. So personally, I never preset blinds. I basically carry my blind in and out every time I hunt.
Well, the scenario that I'm used to hunting, and I think probably I would guess most guys are as well, is I like to have a half dozen options in different fields where I know turkeys are and have been in the past. Because of the filming aspect, and I had thought, Jason, after we would talk to Cuz quite a bit, where he said, you got to give up your bow and all this, and I've always sacrificed the hunt in a lot of cases for the stories, and we have to on the whitetail side in filming, and we have to on the turkey side in filming, and we're trying to get 5 camera views of every kill with a bow, and I'm self-filming half the time. So there are certain circumstances that I can't just pack in my blind and go with all my equipment. So I am restricted somewhat to going to preset blinds, but I have plenty of them, different options. So with that being said, if I've got trail camera pictures of turkeys, I've always had the scenario where I'm sitting in a field and the turkey's on the other side of the field, and whether it's with hens or not, be wary, and they just will not come up there, and there's just nothing you can do. What I guess, like, if I'm doing calling correctly and I'm blind calling and trying to call something in, one of the questions I always have is, how often do you call? Is that the typical?
Yeah, that question is probably the most common question I have asked from people. Well, how much do you call? Do I call this much and this much? And it's an impossible question to answer, because at times I have people that I'm hunting with who complain to me that I'm not calling enough. And then the next time I have someone saying, wow, you sure do call a lot. It's if I'm engaging with turkeys, if I'm like you, if I see that gobbler on the other end of the field,
mm-hmm.
and you can see him,
mm-hmm.
I will call as aggressively as I can muster up, as much as I can, and look at him and see how he's reacting to that calling, and I'll keep pouring it on until he either gives me that look like, I don't know about this, I don't like it, but
sure.
You have to try it in that scenario, and that's where practicing with your call is so important, so that you're proficient enough that you can be confident in your mind that when you're in that situation, that you can really lay into them. You can really create a little scenario like these two hens are not getting along, and they're, and
sure.
I've saved a lot of hunts by calling ultra aggressively to those turkeys that just, turkeys are weird, right?
Yeah,
we don't know what's going on in their head, but you're going to increase your law of averages by, giving it a try.
Well, and that was, I guess, one of my things coming from the whitetail world, which is where my brain is always wrapped around. There's, when you're hunting these mature deer, you gotta be really careful about overcalling and just educating them. And in fact, I don't even like to call it any whitetails. But so for turkeys, you don't worry nearly as much as like educating them. So long as they're there and they're fanning, going back and forth, you've still got them duped to a certain degree, I would say.
Yeah. You know what? Try it 2-3 days in a row. If after 3 days aggressive calling doesn't work, well, then try something different. But
sure,
I'm not really a big believer in turkeys getting call shy. They will learn situations that are not healthy for them, and they'll learn them in a big hurry. But wild turkeys communicate a lot with each other year-round. So as hunters are making turkeys call shy, why aren't the real turkeys making them call shy? Because they call a lot more than I do. You know what I mean? It's just,
Sure.
It doesn't line up. It doesn't line up scientifically to think that we're making turkeys call shy.
Okay.
Because
That's something.
That's just the way they naturally communicate. So it's happening all the time, whether we're there or not. Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we're out there. If you just look at the broad spectrum of time, we're out there a sliver of time. The turkeys are out there every day, 24/7, communicating with each other. I had 60 to 65 hens this winter using my corn food plot. You know, I leave corn standing. And it was apparently, what I'm assuming, 2 or 3 or 4 brood flocks that had never been able to figure out who's top of the pecking order, because I am not kidding you. It was literally hours of loud, aggressive calling every day. I'd take the dog out for a walk at daybreak, they'd be calling. I'd go out to get wood for my fireplace at 8 o'clock, they're still going.
Wow.
So, yeah, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that turkeys get call shy.
Yeah, that is interesting. I guess I wouldn't have expected that.
Well, one last question in regard to dominance. Like a lot of the calling techniques and the different ways that I've been successful with big dominant whitetails is knowing, you know, the animals that you're calling at and trying to play into that dominance factor of, you know, of essentially pissing them off enough to getting them to come out and become vulnerable.
Yep.
When it comes to like turkeys, like I'm just going to do a quick story. Last year, myself and my good friend Eddie were hunting here on my farm, and I'd been watching this monster all season long, this giant. I could tell it was the same turkey because he had a wing feather that was flipped up, broken, and it just looked goofy. But I watched him all season. And Eddie and I hunted here for 3 or 4 days in a row, and we saw a bunch of different toms, but we didn't see that tom. And we were hunting up in where I thought was his core area based on what I'd seen just from my house, and nothing would come into our setup. And then sure enough, the last morning he pops up and he came tearing in like he was going to kill those like the turkeys that were in his area. Is dominance a thing? I mean, like I'm assuming it is, but how is it by comparison to like whitetails? I mean, is it literally, is one tom afraid of another tom in this core area, and so he'll stay out, and maybe that has a reason why some of them are call shy sometimes, or they won't come into a setup?
I think the flock dynamics of pecking order are as complex, if not more complex, than that of whitetails. Many of those adult toms who are bigger and older are loners. They don't have buddies. The thing about turkeys is they also work in packs. I've seen many times where a flock of jakes will have pecking order dominance over a single big old tom, and that complexity is what I think makes turkeys do weird things in our mind, because it is probably the most important aspect in a turkey's life, especially in the spring, in the breeding season. He has been, there's many gobblers out there at all different age structures that have been conditioned throughout the year to be lower on the pecking order. And I think this is where a lot of the call shy lore in the hunting world comes from. You have a gobbler that responds to you well, he comes in a certain distance and he hangs up and he won't come any closer. And it's my belief that, and then people say, well, he's call shy.
Sure.
Well, it's my belief that turkey is the one that's been conditioned to not approach other turkeys. If he hears a hen calling loudly, in his mind, there's a good chance that there's a gobbler with that hen that has beat him up.
Sure.
So he's going to be extremely leery and skeptical when coming in.
Okay.
So we as turkey hunters develop these little tricks that work a small percentage of the time, where we try calling from different positions. We do different things. The most consistent thing that I've found to increasing your effectiveness in scenarios like that is to use decoys with a very subordinate posture. The body posture of your decoys, 10 years ago, no one was thinking about body postures of turkeys when they were making turkey decoys, it seems like. In general, a turkey with a higher head position is dominant over the other turkey.
Okay.
The turkey has the lower head position as the one that's lower on the pecking order. So when I'm using decoys, I want as low of body position and head position as I, can muster out of my decoys. And one of the things I tell people is, depending on the height of the grass or whatever, where you're hunting, where you're placing your decoys, always place your decoys as low as possible while maintaining visibility. So if you're in a plowed field, have that thing right down on the ground.
Mine have looked like they've been on stilts all these years, I think.
I've seen so many videos where, a turkey comes in and he's got to look up at the decoy. And like I said, things work, but keep that decoy low.
Oh, wow. Well, bigger's better, taller's better, right? You figure they're going to see it better, but oh my.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
I'm glad you started talking about decoys. One of my good friends, his name's Matt Ellison. He's a turkey killing machine. He's killed a billion turkeys. And he has told me 450 million times, he's like, dude, buy some Dave Smith decoys. And he said, he keeps saying that it does make a big difference in the number of toms that'll commit to your decoy set. How much truth is that? Because I called the world record into a foam decoy with an arrow sticking 6 inches out of its back. And it had been sitting in my CRP field for a year before I brought it out and actually used it. So you could not have picked a more dilapidated... Dude, it looked like it was made in China in 1943.
Well, again, turkeys are weird. You can always find that scenario. My mantra is with decoys is, you want to put yourself in a situation where it's the highest percentage of success rate. So obviously the realism and quality of that decoy is crucial to working the highest percentage of situations. The new decoys like the Dave Smiths have absolutely nailed the anatomy, and they are getting much more conscious of body posture, and that is definitely increasing the odds and the success of the decoys. I'm going to tell you a little story so I quit using turkey decoys in 1989 because I had too many situations where you would be calling a turkey in, he'd be coming in perfectly, he'd see the decoy, and then everything would go bad after that. And it's like I kept saying to myself, well, if I didn't have the decoy out, I'm sure I would have just called him in and got him. Mm-hmm. But over the years, so then quite a few years later, I'm watching a PBS special called The Life of Birds with David Attenborough, and they were explaining... They had a segment where it talked about iridescent feathers and the UV vision in birds. And they talked about, I believe it was a study they did where they took a starling, a very iridescent bird, and they painted it black and they put it back out and they monitored that starling to see what would happen. They're recognized as a starling by the other starlings. It wasn't in the flock.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched that, a light bulb went off in my head that, yeah, that's why these turkey decoys don't work. We as humans see the world in the same way that a turkey does. We have 3 sets of rods and cones in our eye, RGB. Turkeys have 4 sets of rods and cones, RGB and ultraviolet. And they also have a colored oil. They have an oil droplet on their eye that human cells lack. That it helps. It's kind of like coating on optics. It helps them see things more vividly, is what the ornithologists, speculate. Which everything is speculation, obviously, because we will never be able to look at the world through the eyes of a turkey. So it became evident to me that there's something going on here with turkey vision and decoys. I had my dad's a taxidermist. I had him do a stuffer for me, and the difference was incredible. Absolutely unbelievable how much, when I watched the turkeys' reaction when they saw the stuffer compared to the human painted decoys over the years, it was pretty evident to me that they saw that as a real turkey. They didn't look at it with that skeptic eye, just by their body posture, what they looked like when they were seeing the decoys.
It's all about that iridescent.
Take that into consideration.
Well, I was going to ask you about it, because years ago in an engineering project, I worked with a guy who was he did duck and goose decoys, and had a patent on a bunch of UV products, mostly paint, that he was selling. And that's what he said. These birds can see in iridescence and in UV in ways that humans, you might as well put sunglasses on and put your head underwater. It's completely different. And all you have to do is look at a turkey or look at any bird's feathers, and you can see that at any different angle of the light, it has so many different colors and so many different lighting aspects of reflectivity, I guess, if you want to call it, that, of course, it's just common sense, that has to make a big deal. So if you were going to say, for all of us guys who are out there still using decoys, is it worth the extra money? And is Dave Smith the best, or are there some other ones for a little bit less money? We're not sponsored by any of these turkey decoy companies. I've bought basically what was available locally, and without being a serious hunter, to spend drop a couple $100 on a decoy. That's a lot of money. I'm just not that into it. Not to mention, that's one decoy. You still need several. So this is a 2-part question. For entry-level budget, what are some good decoys? And then also, for the novice hunter like myself, who's out typically putting your decoy set in front of your ground blind, trying to film whatever, what do you recommend? 2 hens and a jake and a tom and a hen? That's the stuff I think that a lot of us just are curious about or don't know, what are we supposed to be doing out here?
Yep. So here's a few quick tips about using turkey decoys. I notice a lot of people it becomes a habit to use decoys. And tell yourself that you can call these things in without decoys. So just keep an open mind about, using decoys. You don't have to put them out every time. I've called many, many, many turkeys in without decoys to a blind sitting out in the middle of a field, which would make no sense to me. Obviously when you're hunting in an open area, the turkey you would think it would make him quite skeptical when he doesn't see a turkey. But
sure.
Again, we can't think, we can't see, we don't know what they're saying. We can't do that through a turkey. So, and another thing that I don't think a lot of people think about is When a wild turkey is wet, now here's what iridescence is scientifically. So on every little hair of that feather, if you look at it under an electron microscope, there's little bitty barbs, microscopic barbs on the hair of that turkey feather.
Sure.
And when you see a wild turkey and you see that color in his feathers, it's not color, it's not a pigment, it is light refraction. There is no actual pigment color in that turkey's feather. What it is you're seeing the reflection of light through that feather. So that's how that works. Now, if you think about that microscopic barb on the hair, and when a turkey gets wet, we all have seen wet turkeys, and they don't look the same when they're wet, right?
Correct.
If you're hunting, I believe, and this is just from years and years of feedback from talking to guys. Now, obviously, turkeys tend to use open areas when it's rainy, but also a lot of hunting success comes on rainy days, and it's guys using decoys, and it cancels out that ultraviolet aspect. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that in the broad scheme of things that is going to increase your odds just a little bit, again, to help things out? So if you're a committed decoy user, make sure you're hunting on them rainy days, misty rainy days when the turkeys are wet.
Okay.
If you're hunting on a sunny day and you have a chance to place your decoys where they're not in direct sunlight, by all means do that. Understand. It's just understanding scientifically how this stuff is working. You can do little bitty things to your setup to help you become more successful a higher percentage of times. And the reason I keep saying a higher percentage of times, because you can take a $10 decoy on a given day, stick it out in a wide open field with the sun shining on it, and the gobblers are going to come in, you're going to shoot them, and it's going to work great.
Sure.
But when you're over the long haul, success is measured by, the law of averages. You want to always want to make decisions that are going to put you in that position to be successful.
Simple statistics.
Simple but complex.
Oh gosh, and that's what you're talking about. There's so many similarities and dissimilarities, I guess, between whitetails too, because you dive into these animals and some things just absolutely make sense, and other things are just common sense. And that's what keeps us all coming back for more, man. If everything was always predictable, patternable, I guess we'd all put high fences up, maybe. But
exactly, it comes right down to this: the wild turkey is just an incredible, amazing resource that we are absolutely blessed to take part in a few days a year in their lives. I mean, I could sit with you for hours and tell you turkey stories that'll make you laugh. There's things that I've witnessed that are just like with whitetail hunting. It's just like, what? I mean, incredible things. Yeah. That is what fuels my passion. I am as excited for turkey season in my 30th year as I was in my third year. Oh, and awesome. It's that absolute passion and interest in that game species that nothing compares. Nothing compares.
Well, and that's what makes you a championship caller and a turkey killing machine too. Is just that passion that if you and the same goes with whitetails, man. That will take you everywhere you need to go if you've got the passion for it and you enjoy doing it for the right reasons. You'll just want more and more and want to keep learning, and that's kind of how my world is for turkeys too, as well as whitetails. It's just a thirst for knowledge and a never-ending quench. But yeah, I've enjoyed this conversation very, very much. I know we've got turkey season just around the corner. And one thing I will say for anybody who's listening, who's bow hunting turkeys, maybe for the first time or thinking about it, these birds are freaking tough animals. And you have a very small window of opportunity. Make sure you really focus and concentrate on your shot, because it only takes 1 inch off and you will never find that bird. They are really, really deceiving at times, because unlike a whitetail or most of the times when you're shooting at deer, turkeys never really seem to stand still. So most of the shots I've ever had at a turkey have always been, they're moving around. And even at 10 yards, man, these things are wiry little animals. And then you've got the different effects that their bodies take on when they're in a semi-strut, full strut, non-strut. You put all these factors together, and the fact that they can turn on a wheel, I mean, just back and forth and all around, and you just make sure you take extra time to practice. If you have a turkey target, probably isn't even better. But they are a very, very challenging animal to hunt, and do not let the videos deceive you. They're tough animals to kill with a bow. And each year, my God, just between myself and all the guys I know, I mean, guys lose turkeys all the time with a bow. So I would really, 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 if you're going to make that commitment to bow hunt them, make sure you've got that in your mind, that it's going to be unlike shooting any whitetail you've ever shot at. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, and again, that you brought up such a great point. And again, it goes back to cherishing that resource. It's our job as hunters to do our absolute best to make a clean, quick kill. And something I like people to understand is, it's going to happen. If you make a bad shot and you lose a turkey, the thing you got to understand is it's not just affecting your hunt and you, but the guys who are hunting the properties around you. Again, that as that flock dynamic shifts, hunting becomes tougher, and obviously the really enjoyable hunts are the successful ones. And it's our duty as hunters to do a good job, harvest that animal quick and clean, and an old gobbler, any gobbler with a long beard is 2 years old. Now I live up here in Wisconsin, and you know darn well that turkey has sat up in the tippy top of an oak tree when it's 20 below zero, the wind's blowing, we're in our safe, warm houses, and that thing has lived through that. He's lived through that. He's toughed it out. He's been there, and it's our job to, if we're going to take that animal, to make sure that we do it in our best fashion we can.
Absolutely, and amen, man. And I guess one quick last question: what the heck isn't a turkey age, like a typical, big gobbler that you see that is, a mature, a dominant bird? What is a typical age range of a typical gobbler or a turkey?
3 and 4 year olds are your 26 pounders with better than 1 inch spurs. The majority of the turkeys that are being killed are your 2-year-old bird. They were Jake's the spring before. But it's very hard, just like with whitetails, it's really hard to age turkeys purely by spur length, which is what we all try and do as hunters.
Sure.
I have a few scenarios where I knew the age of a turkey after the fact. One of them was a turkey shot near Coloma, Wisconsin, that had a wing tag on it from the original release. It was released 20 miles from where the guy shot it, the way the crow flies. 20 miles, and that turkey was 9 years old. And if I would have looked at him, I would have said it's a 3-year-old because he had about 1 inch spurs.
Okay.
And he weighed 23 pounds. So there we go.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah.
I've always been curious to know, or I was curious just how old the world record I shot was, because it was such an unbelievable specimen. I had no idea, if it was a 3-year-old or a 15-year-old. I just don't know that much about turkeys, but
yep, between 4 and 15 is, there were turkeys that I hunted back in the day that I quite certain were old birds, you know, either the first hatch off of the original release, you know, and I was hunting them 9-10 years later, and you know, we'll never know. It's really incredible. I have seen birds, some of the white ones and off-colored birds, where they knew when it was a Jake and they knew when it was a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. I've seen 3-year-old turkeys with 1 3/8 spurs. So again, it's you get any turkey. I compare spur length right in line with whitetail antlers. If you get a 1.5" spur, 1.5, that's like shooting a 150-inch buck in my mind.
Okay.
If you shoot one with 1 3/4, 1.75, that's like shooting a booner. You know, 175-inch deer.
Cool, cool. Well, and I'm sure the area, just like whitetails, where they live, you know, down in the farm country versus up in the timber country, you know, makes a big difference. But the thing that I think got me hooked on turkeys is that when you see one up close, they are like shooting a dinosaur. I mean, they are absolutely the most prehistoric, crazy, beautiful birds. I mean, they're. My wife looks at them and she thinks they're the ugliest things on earth. I got the world record mounted up in our living room, and to me, every time I look at it, I still think they're the most gorgeously awkward, weird, dinosaur-looking birds ever. And why would you not want to go out and chase them, man? I mean, you really, if you've never gone turkey hunting before, trust me when I say it is absolutely. It's wild, and it's so much different than whitetail hunting, and it's the greatest time of year to be out in the spring when everything's greening up and beautiful, and all those different factors, I think, is what makes turkey hunters go so nuts. Because once you get your feet wet and start playing around with it, it just makes you want to do it more. And I just, man, I dig it. What a cool thing to do in the springtime.
Yeah. The more I live around and experience and witness turkeys and turkey behavior, and the cooler they are to me. Absolutely, sure. 100%.
You bet, man. Well, Jason, do you have any closing thoughts for us, my friend?
I do. Jeff, tell us a little bit. First of all, thanks for coming on the show. It was interesting, even though we've been friends for a long, long time. It was interesting to hear how you've grown as a hunter and an outdoorsman, and just tell us a little bit about what your credentials are in terms of you know, I know that you were a champion caller in Wisconsin, I don't know, 25,000 times. And I know you went to I had retired from calling contests after you know, it's family related. Turkey calling contests are like a bad gambling habit. I'd always say to my wife, but if I could just get to the next one, I'll win. I'll win the big money, you know. And you know, over time, it just your life changes, your family is growing, and I was finding that I couldn't commit to the level of practice that I had adhered to back in the days when I was winning. But anyway, so in 2010, I retired from calling contests. I had won Wisconsin, the state and open 12 different years.
Holy cow.
I had won the Mid-America down in St. Louis. That was the biggest contest I had won. You know, numerous Iowa and Minnesota wins. I made the cut in the Nationals 3 different times. And, you know, again, what happens is you come to a point in your life where you have to choose between turkey hunting and taking a vacation day to go to a calling contest, and turkey hunting wins for me. So sure. I'm not going to give up a day of turkey hunting to go to a calling contest. But I've been building mouth calls since the mid-90s, off and on, and I really started mastering it, I would say, like around 1994, and I've been mastering the craft. in my opinion, to get a super good mouth call, it's not a mass-producible item. It takes a lot of touch and feel and experience to really build a call that is truly going to replicate the voice of a hen or a gobbler. So yeah, other than that, I started turkey hunting. Our first year was 1987. I'm so excited for 2017 because it's my 30th anniversary. I'm going to go down and at least hunt a day on the public land where I started down in Crawford County, Wisconsin, and hopefully bring back a flood of memories from that first year.
Awesome.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's totally killer.
Where can we've got listeners from New York to Texas to Arizona up to Oregon and then back. Where could they buy one of your turkey calls?
I have them on my website, FrederickChampionsChoice.com. So it's FrederickChampionsChoice.com. And when I get an order, I get an email saying I got an order, and I build that call right then and there, and I stick it in an envelope and I mail it to you, and they're all handmade, and I make your call the day I get the order.
Well, do you have a selection box on your when you're describing the call you want for people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing, like myself?
My Champion's Choice call is what I call it.
Okay.
Is what I start. Anyone who hasn't used my call, start with the 4-reed Champion's Choice. That is the call I've started many, many, many people on that call. Once you got that one down, you learn how to run my calls that are, meticulously built. Try some of the other ones. I don't have I don't see the need for big fancy cuts and all that stuff. I just have 2 cut styles in a 3 and a 4 reed, and that's going to cover the gamut of sound.
Cool, man. Well, I know I'm going to be trying one this year for sure. So
you're going to be at the Wisconsin Deer and Turkey Expo. We're recording this a week beforehand, so you'll be there this coming weekend, which is when we're going to air this. So it'll be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the Alliant Energy Center in Madison, Wisconsin. Correct?
Yep, I'm down on the other end of the concourse where you come in the doors, the big hallway. I'm on the other end of that. You'll just stand there and listen. You'll hear me calling.
You're in the door and a little ways away from the Wicked Tree Gear booth, but I saw on the exhibitor map where you were going to be at. So if anyone wants to look you up while you're there, or Wicked Tree Gear for that matter, they're both going to be at the Wisconsin Deer and Turkey Expo at the Alliant Energy Center March 31st, April 1st, and 2nd. Any closing remarks, Jeff? Final thoughts, marching orders?
Practice with your calls before you go out hunting.
I'm gonna definitely be stopping by the booth, Jeff, when we're in Wisconsin, and to meet you face to face and to pick up a call and have you hopefully give me some instructions so that I can go out and hopefully get one of these big toms that are running around. But just want to thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and thank everybody for listening to the White Knuckle Podcast. We're going to keep bringing you all this information, and in the event that you don't learn anything, send Jason a private message.
Yes, do that. That'd be great. All right, Jeff. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today. As always, I'll have our guests' website in our show notes. You can find Jeff on Facebook, and then again at his website, which I'll post in our show notes. With that, we'll say goodbye to everybody today. Thanks for listening. And well, there you have it, some nuggets of wisdom from the man himself, Jeff Fredericks. As he said, he'll be at the Wisconsin Deer and Turkey Expo, as will Wicked Tree Gear, and as will I. Hope that any of you are in the area, stop on by to one of those booths and say hi. If you happen to stop by Jeff's booth, make sure you tell him that you heard him on this podcast, and he will get a big kick out of it. If you stop at the Wicked Tree Gear booth, make sure you also tell them you listen to our podcast. As always, we would appreciate your feedback, whether you give us feedback on our social media channels or whether you give us feedback right on iTunes. Any feedback is important. We would love to get a review from you on iTunes. We absolutely need a little bit more in that department. We've got 3 great reviews right now, and we could definitely use some more. If you don't know how to find our podcast, grab your phone or device. If you have an iPad, iPhone, or an iPod, put in the search in the iTunes store, White Knuckle Podcast. This will help you to download the free podcast app that's produced by Apple, and then subscribe to the show within that app. Every time that I produce a new episode, you will get it downloaded right to your iDevice. For Android listeners, download the Stitcher app. That is also free, and it will accomplish the exact same thing. With that, I just want to say thanks for listening, and have a great rest of your week.